offering a series of messages on Kriya Yoga living, qualities of our awakened heart. And today's message is focused on humility, knowledge that brings humility. And the quote I have been working with is the one by Paramahansa Yogananda by Kriya Yoga, one's consciousness functions on a higher plane. By Kriya Yoga, one's consciousness functions on a higher plane. Devotion to the infinite spirit then arises spontaneously in one's heart. It's always useful for us to have a spiritual practice, a spiritually conscious way of living that supports us in right thought and action every day. But in difficult times, it becomes undeniably essential to our well-being to have that practice and that way of accessing spiritual resources. We need to discover deeper resources, resilience, patience, equanimity, wisdom, creativity, compassion, and more. And we need that now. Viktor Frankl wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." And if we could say that there are blessings during this time, then surely that is one of them, is being faced so squarely with having to transform our consciousness and our lives to meet the pressing needs of this time. And we have deeper resources. They are the divine qualities that are inherent to the soul, to our very being. And when our heart and our mind are purified through spiritual practice, those resources, those soul powers naturally emerge. This is what Paramahansaji was pointing out when he noted that through Kriya Yoga, the spiritual discipline of self and God realization, it's possible for us to function on a higher plane. Then the divine qualities within the soul, such as devotion, wisdom, compassion, or peace, arise spontaneously and to light up, to guide our thoughts and our actions. There's a beautiful description of many of these qualities in chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita, the first 3 verses in that chapter. And I'm going to read from my Guru Roy Eugene Davis from his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, the eternal way, inner meaning of the Bhagavad Gita. And chapter 16, he terms as the yoga of discernment between the higher and lower natures. So it starts off with this description of these qualities that are within us, that are inherent to our very being: fearlessness, purity of heart, abiding in yoga or samadhi, along with knowledge, charitable giving, self-restraint, and holy offerings, study of sacred texts, austerity, and uprightness, nonviolence, truth, absence of anger, renunciation, serenity, freedom from finding fault, compassion for all beings, absence of cravings, gentleness, modesty, steadiness, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, freedom from malice, and freedom from pride. These are the endowments of those born to a divine destiny. And then he goes on in his commentary to describe that these qualities are sattvic, they're life enhancing and elevating, and that when they're spontaneously expressed, they indicate spiritual awareness and an abundance, he says, of constructive karma. And then there's a short list in the following verse of those behaviors and characteristics that are consistent with our lower nature: hypocrisy and arrogance and pride and anger and violence and insolence, ignorance. And so it's a shorter list, which is great. And there he says these qualities are rajasic and tamasic, or life diminishing and awareness restricting. And when they're spontaneously expressed or uncontrollably demonstrated under duress, they indicate impaired or clouded spiritual awareness and the existence of destructive karma and tendencies. And the next verse says that the divine qualities, the divine destiny leads to liberation. The lower characteristics lead to bondage. But then the reassurance from Lord Krishna, don't grieve because you are born with a divine destiny. So there's that reassurance that it is our purpose to bring out those higher qualities, to bring out those divine qualities. In the first message in this series, I talked about one of those qualities, self-restraint or self-discipline, and how it can occur on two levels, either through self-effort and self-correction that comes through, noticing our thoughts, our speech, our behavior that are not consistent with the highest good and making a course correction. Or this self-discipline and self-restraint can happen through spontaneous right action, which occurs when we are established in higher consciousness, when we are connected to the soul's peace, when attention and awareness are anchored in our essential nature, we experience the peace of the soul. And when we experience that peace, then the mental field is clarified, and we are better able to use our discernment to make wise choices that are in harmony with the soul. So in that case, it's not so much a matter of effort as it is due to clarity of awareness. And this is one of the great rationales for meditating regularly, because it clarifies the mental field, connects us to the soul, and we just behave better as a result. All the divine qualities listed, I think, work on these two levels: the level of approaching cultivation of these qualities through disciplined effort, taking corrective action, bringing ourselves into alignment with those higher qualities, behaviors, sattvic qualities, or the higher level, which is spontaneous cooperation with the infinite. This week's focus is on humility. And the Gita verse refers to that as freedom from pride. Pride, of course, we can recognize as a trait of the ego, that function of the mind which imagines itself as the doer of action and the owner of experience. It's the I, the me, that is proud of myself and whatever I think is mine or due to me. And the ego-based identity, is fragile. It's fragile because it is insubstantial. It's insubstantial because it's not rooted in the truth. So it continually needs to be propped up. You may have noticed this. I notice it from time to time. So when we mistakenly identify with the false self, we have a need to be right. We have a need to be appreciated, to know that we're appreciated, to be told that we're competent, that we're good. And, the list goes on. And we need that from that perspective, because we mistakenly connect our sense of existence to it. So we need that outer agreement, that outer affirmation, because we are not coming from the place of inner reality or inner strength. So one helpful practice to cultivate humility is asking ourselves, and I think especially in the heat of the moment, do I need to be right? Do I really need to be right? Do I need to insist on being right? It's amazing what that question can do to kind of pop us out of that identification with ego. So, humility makes us nicer to know and easier to live with. But the spiritual function of humility, I think, is something much greater. And I consider the spiritual function of humility to be receptivity to divine support, openness to a higher power to guide us and to support us and to nurture us. When we get over the I, me, my thing of, I own it, I did it, I'm this or I'm that, we can be open to the true source of all that is, and we can be more receptive to divine grace. We can let go of trying so hard to be what we're not and to be what we are, which is divine. So brings that brings us to an interesting juncture or tension point. If we really think about this, how can we recognize the divine truth of our being and still be humble? How can we recognize the divine truth of our being? I am that. I am the divine reality, and still be humble. There's a story that I really like from the Jewish tradition that says that Rabbi Simcha had a practice for this. He always carried 2 slips of paper, one in each pocket. On one he wrote, "For my sake, the world was created. For my sake, the entire world was created." So this is equivalent to, I am the light of the world. And then on the other slip of paper, he wrote, "I am nothing but dust." Then he would take out whichever slip of paper was necessary to remind himself in a particular moment. So true humility is recognizing both the insignificance and the magnificence of what we are. It's recognizing both our insignificance and our magnificence, complete emptiness and fullness, empty of ego, yet radiantly full as the divine self shines through. So first we cultivate humility by getting over egotism, a false sense of pride or superiority in all its forms, or even the flip side, the sense of inferiority. Both are an ego-based problem. Getting over egotism, that overdeveloped sense of self-importance, is usually not that difficult. A little honest introspection, discernment, some good talks from a close friend or a spouse or our children, or some time on the spiritual path, or usually just life itself will clue us in that we're really not that hot. So that's getting over egotism, the inflated sense of the false self. The second level is more difficult because that's the root that we're trying to pull out with our sadhana, our spiritual practice, and that is egoism, the fundamental obstacle on the spiritual path, mistakenly identifying what we are as spiritual beings with the mind, the body, all the roles that we play in life. So getting free of egoism is the primary focus of Kriya Yoga. Self-realization is liberation from that. That is avidya, wrong knowledge of what we are, the mistaken sense of identity. And so ultimately we want to find the realization of the true self. And there is infinite freedom in self-realization and humility that accompanies it. There's infinite freedom in self-realization and the humility that accompanies it. So as an exercise this morning, consider or imagine along with me freedom from the need to control circumstances or other people. Not that we could anyway, but freedom from the desire trying to do that. Freedom from the need to control circumstances or other people. Freedom to be happy for no reason. Try these on with me right now. The ability to be comfortable with uncertainty. I know if we were in the temple right now, somebody would be saying amen. The ability to be comfortable with uncertainty. Why? Because we're grounded in the certainty of the self. Grateful and appreciative for all that is given every day. And the ability to accept others as they are, ourselves as we are, and life on life's terms. So, how do we do that? Well, we can start by letting go of clinging to our opinions. Just try it and then watch what begins to happen to your body, to your mind, sort of letting go. Start by letting go of clinging to opinions. I want to close by telling you that many years ago, I was remembering this the other day, I had a conversation with my spiritual teacher, Roy Eugene Davis. We were talking about a man who is a very successful minister in the New Thought movement. And I mentioned to my teacher that this minister told me that he got his start in metaphysics by studying the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. And he told me that he benefited greatly from those teachings and then he moved on from there. Well, I was indignant and I said to my teacher, good Lord, how could anyone move on from there? And my teacher was quiet for a moment. And then he softly replied to me, I think Master would have been very pleased. No clinging, no pride, very pleased. So here's our inspiration from the third patriarch of Zen, the mind of absolute trust. The great way isn't difficult for those who are unattached to their preferences. Let go of longing and aversion, and everything will be perfectly clear. When you cling to a hair breadth of distinction, heaven and earth are set apart. If you want to realize the truth, don't be for or against. The struggle between good and evil is the primal disease of the mind. Not grasping after deeper meaning, you just trouble your mind's serenity. As vast as infinite space, it is perfect and lacks nothing. Not grasping the deeper meaning, you just trouble your mind's serenity. As vast as infinite space, it is perfect and lacks nothing. But because you select and reject, you can't perceive its true nature. Don't get entangled in the world. Be at peace in the oneness of things. All errors will disappear by themselves. Don't keep searching for truth. Just let go of your opinions.